We are fabulously wealthy, engaged philanthropists who wish to fund the next best films. But our definition of best films and your definition of best films have to match. And we need to know from you that they do. And that's what pitching is about. That's what we do here. Truthfully, I'm Judith Vecchione, and I'm an executive producer at WGBH, Boston's public television station. And I don't have any money at all, I'm sorry. Or I would fund your films because I know out here is the next best wonderful film. I know that it's here. And I would if I had it. I am sorry. We want to move very quickly into the actual meat of this panel, which is going to be listening to pitches. We have 4 brave volunteer filmmaker group or filmmakers together who are willing to give us a pitch and listen to constructive ideas about what worked and what didn't. Hopefully that will be very informative for you. Let me run down. I'm not going to run down the panel. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll just jump right into pitching.
Hi, I'm Kim Britzalara. I'm on the executive board of the Hamptons Film Festival, and I created and chair a section called Films of Conflict and Resolution, which are films from conflict zones. I have been a philanthropic funder of documentaries and international conflict projects, and I'm also an investor and a producer of a feature film.
Hi, my name is Allison Winchell, and I am Senior Director in Primetime Programming at PBS. And so this is basically what I do for a living. I invite people to come into my office and tell me about their ideas, and we talk about them, and hopefully then goes to the next step of funding and broadcast. But I want to also say to the filmmakers, you're very brave to be able to do this in front of a large audience, so please don't be nervous. We're excited about your projects, and thanks for being here.
I'm Eileen Newman, the Director of Programming at IFP, the Independent Feature Project. I left information about that is downstairs because we run a big market every year for especially it's becoming much more of a documentary market where we take people's work in progress and try to hook those people up with people interested in funding them towards completion and distribution. We also, the purpose of IFP is really to connect people on a daily basis in whatever way we can to the industry. So we work with many, 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 many filmmakers throughout the year.
Hello. I'm actually taller on the panel, so I can see some of you over there. I see heads peeking there. I'm Rudy Boutignol, and I'm the creative head of network programming at TV Ontario. TV Ontario is a public service broadcaster in the province of Ontario. We're funded very much like PBS from a government, actually different from PBS, a large government grant, and a viewer support. And I'm also the commissioning editor of documentaries, and we work with independent producers looking at authored documentaries, limited series, and from Canada and from around the world, and looking forward to working with filmmakers and helping them to tell their stories so that they may find audiences around the world.
I'm Louise Rosen. My company, Louise Rosen Limited, represents independent nonfiction producers. We work with producers from a very early stage in helping them to put together financing through pre-sale of rights to broadcasters internationally, people such as Rudy and his colleagues around the world. I work with a very small portfolio of projects each year. I'm, after spending 15 years as a distributor working across all genres, I'm now a nonfiction specialist and work very closely with projects almost in a kind of producerly fashion, advising on treatments, proposals, budgets, approach, and so on. And have been back in the Boston area since 1998 after being based in Europe for many years.
So what we have here is a whole series of different perspectives, and that's the first thing to think about with pitching, obviously, is the perspective that you're pitching to. Here are the rules. We have 4 possible teams or individuals. We have not told them who's up first, and they're just going to get called as they go. We're going to try very hard in our very short time to fit all 4 in. We think that would be really good. We have we've told the people pitching, and I keep wanting to call you guys pitchers, but it doesn't quite work, especially in Red Sox territory, the pitchers, that they have a strict 7 minutes as their maximum for whatever they want to do. If they want to speak, if they want to sing, if they want to show tapes, anything, yodeling, very, very nice. And then we will spend 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully 13, moving through the panel, getting comments, helping shape your understanding of what was really excellent about their proposals and maybe what they might think about again for the next time. And everybody clear on this? We all ready? Let's go. We will start with Arnie Reisman and Ann Carol Grossman with The Powder and the Glory.
Someone's going to queue up a DVD.
Do you want a microphone?
Oh, how do you want to do it?
I think you should just hand them a microphone.
Definitely need a microphone.
Wait, while we're handing a microphone around, I need to say 2 more things. One is that we are taping this for broadcast on WGBH's Forum Network, and I hope nobody minds that. And we should make sure we repeat the questions. There is a microphone in the audience for questions, but in case it doesn't get picked up. Maybe you need to.
You want to sit there and I sit here?
I don't think it'll reach if they're standing there.
This always happens at media functions.
We're not prepared for this.
We can take it.
Take it out.
Is it stuck?
No,
Oh,
it
it's
just
all,
needs
it's
to be
all
unplugged.
wired in.
Actually, it's just wired.
Well, I can stand back here.
What's this? Where's this? Wait, what is this
Can
one?
you unhook it from there? We'll pass it back here.
I could stand back here.
There it is.
We have not yet started the clock on them. They're okay.
Are we right? No, it's
Give him back the mic.
There we are.
Yeah, got it. But now it's not.
For anyone that's had experience with an extension cord, this is the technology.
Right.
You really need.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
Then
look.
Look at that.
Oh, no, it's.
There it is.
Yeah.
Behind you.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that.
That's a great pitch. We love it.
There you go.
I
Okay.
wouldn't suggest anything.
I feel like I'm doing Psycho. That was a show about nothing. So we're ready?
We're ready.
We have you can start this. It's about 5 minutes of video wallpaper. There's no sound in it. And then do the honors. Yes. All right. With her packaging and my product, we could have ruled the world. That's Helena Rubinstein on Elizabeth Arden. They did rule the world, their world. 100 years ago, they came to New York as immigrants, reinvented themselves, and created what is today the $30 billion global health and beauty industry. When they opened their first shops, cosmetics were used mostly by prostitutes and performers, and businesses were run mostly by men. In a matter of a few decades, these 2 women changed the way we look at each other and make vast fortunes. Their story, our story, we're calling The Powder and the Glory. One came from a farm in Canada, the other from a ghetto in Poland. One offered a fragile, feminine, old-fashioned beauty, the other an urban, edgy, glamorous woman of drama. Their entrepreneurial spirit and sense of competition fueled a 50-year rivalry. They lived and worked just 2 blocks apart in New York, but never met. They despised each other and were driven to outdo each other. At various times, they poached each other's employees. Rubinstein once even hired Arden's ex-husband, Tommy Lewis. This was after Arden once said to him, "Dear, never forget one little point. It's my business. You just work it." Rubinstein had trouble with husbands too, but to be honest, these women were married to their destinies in business. They were there, ahead of their time, as more and more women moved to cities seeking independent lives. Their cosmetics helped to change the culture. They were there ahead of their time at the outset of the consumer movement, and their companies grew with it. Soon their names were known the world over. Their products and salons were in New York, Toronto, London, Paris, Berlin, Sydney, South Africa, Brazil, and Argentina. Wherever they went, they turned pots of moisturizer cream into pots of gold. Nothing costs only $1 is worth having. Elizabeth Arden. Some women won't buy anything unless they can pay a lot. Helena Rubinstein. They seem to agree on at least two issues. If you want your product to sell, charge a lot. And a lady's face is her most important feature. Indeed, it was the face that launched 1,000 shops. They appealed to the high-end market, introducing facials and were the first to experiment with exercise. They even opened. Arden opened a spa called the Maine Chance Spa up in Maine. And as the 20s roared to a climax, a prescient Rubinstein decided to sell off her American division to Lehman Brothers for more than $7 million. That's $72 million in today's dollars. During the Depression, she bought it back for $1.5 million. While she was making her $6 million profit, Arden also continued to prosper in hard times. The more women pull their hair and chew their nails, she said, the more they need us. As men rushed off to World War II and women filled the factories, Arden and Rubinstein catered to both. They produced creams for camouflage and for scars and for making your legs look like nylon stockings. Outside interests, Rubinstein was a serious collector of avant-garde and African art. She also sat for portraits that were done by Picasso, by Dali, and by Graham Sutherland. Arden loved horses and became well known in the world of thoroughbred racing. And in 1947, her horse, Jet Pilot, won the Kentucky Derby. In 1959, one of her horses bit the hand that fed him. Arden lost her fingertip, but never her cool. She marched off to the hospital and quickly got her finger sewn back on. When hearing of this mishap, Madame Rubinstein said, "Oh dear, such a shame. Do tell me, how is the horse?" This rivalry only ended with their deaths in the 1960s. Although they were just 4'10" and 5'2", they were business giants. We have exclusive rights to the book War Paint by British author Lindy Woodhead. Her access to their letters and diaries helped create an incredibly true and rich portrait. We have access to her research and to the archives of the Helena Rubinstein Foundation and Elizabeth Arden, Inc. These women never met face-to-face until now, and we're going to show you why they were geniuses who could have sold anything. We will accomplish this with a contemporary treatment that includes stills and ads, rarely seen footage, location filming, interviews, colors, and music to suit the periods. This is a 50-year study of a rivalry in business. It's also a 50-year history of advertising, marketing, and a constantly changing culture. Arden and Rubinstein were there for all of it.
And well, you may ask, why are we going to make this particular film now, today? And there are several reasons why the timing is good for this. First, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of Arden coming to New York and opening her first shops, while Rubinstein was at the same time opening shops in London and Paris before coming to America. Second, these women paved the way for other women to make it to the top of the business world. And when we hear today so much about how it's a struggle to break through the glass ceiling, it's really astonishing to remember the barriers that they broke through, moving mountains of prejudice and tradition, and that was 100 years ago. Our timing also coincides with the international release of the book War Paint, which first appeared in London in hardcover in 2003. What we're doing now, we've taken a few interviews with Lindy Woodhead and with a few people who actually knew and worked with Arden and Rubinstein, who've been dead for 40 years. So these were people who were quite young but knew them at the time. And we're planning some other interviews in the near future with subject matter experts. Louise Rosen has been marketing the film outside the United States and has successfully negotiated pre-sale agreements in the Netherlands and Finland, and is working with several other countries. And we've been making some contacts in the United States, and we're spending a huge chunk of our time doing, guess what, fundraising. I want to say in conclusion that in the last 2 years we've come to have a tremendous affection for these amazing women, and we're very excited and can't wait to be able to tell their story. Thank you.
Okay, they're well within their 7 minutes. That's a good start. And obviously, we can't ask Louise to comment on this one, but who would like to step in?
I can start. Again, I'm with PBS. And do you want me to sort of give you first They're the filmmakers. My impression of the project or the pitch? I'll give you either. Whichever one. Okay. Start with the project first, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I love this project, and I just find it immediately engaging. And when I try to explain to you why I find it engaging, I think it's a combination. Right from the outset, you establish the dramatic tension between the two women. So we know that there's going to be this really fabulous story that takes us over the course of the 2 hours, 1 hour, whatever. 90 minutes, okay. Over the 90 minutes. So right away, we're guaranteed a pretty interesting hour. On top of all of that, these two women, between the two of them, have lived through almost a century of American history. I realize they both immigrated to the United States, but they made their base in the U.S. And so what I love about this program is that while it's about the women and the drama between the two women and their accomplishments, you have this opportunity to learn so much about the history of the United States, and then also entrepreneurship in the United States, women's rights in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say right off the bat, that's what attracts me to the program.
Did the pitch do that? Did the pitch show you all that?
That's a really good question. I cheated a little bit because I got to see this.
All right, you didn't see that, so you have to now pretend that you haven't seen anything about this material before. What did the pitch contain enough? It doesn't have to be, I'm not putting you on the spot. It can be someone else. I don't mind.
Actually, I'm a good person to answer that because, loud too. Come on, I'm from New York. You can hear me back there. We're used to this. I'm a good person to answer that question because I read the little blurb about it, and being a social issue documentary junkie from lefty from New York, I thought, whatever, who cares? I mean, on some levels, I'm going to be very honest. It wasn't a compelling topic for me. I thought, it's interesting. I knew nothing about them at all. So the pitch really changed that for me because I felt that you set them up in a way that made them compelling and that you plunk them into that whole cultural piece. The one thing that I thought was a little bit missing, and part of the reason why this is so timely now, is that even on Law and Order last night, there was a woman who died as a result of taking drugs that didn't work with each other after plastic surgery. So I think that's the other piece, too, of sort of where we are on that road that they began. So I thought there was a lot of potential here, and you really won me over with this. And I also thought it has great cable television potential, and that would be a good audience for it.
Yeah, I would like to. I loved this idea, and your pitch matched my vision of it before I saw it. As an investor, I would want to know more about who you are, who your team is, who the director certainly is. Have you approached the families of either of these women, the companies, the foundations? So I'd like to know, for me, up front.
But it may be true, but it's not in the pitch. Okay, it's important to point out that if this is a question she has, but you didn't put it in the pitch, it needed to be in your pitch, or you have to think about if it needed to be in your pitch. Go on,
I guess I just realized, in commenting, in needing to comment on this subject, realized I'm the man that is now going to comment on this very female topic, and I guess I just work here. I don't own the story or anything, but I thought your pitch was exuberant. I like the tone. I think you picked two really interesting, dynamic characters where there's a lot of story in there. I think getting back to your question of whether the feminist angle is really pulled through, that one I don't sense, and I would go back to the premise of your question of why now. And I don't think the 100th anniversary of opening a shop is that relevant. Where I think you've got two great characters. Again, you touched briefly on the idea of the glass ceiling, but these were people that didn't have a glass ceiling, and I think to contemporize it in a narrative that makes it that articulates your feminist perspective, if that's what you're interested in. I kind of got it from reading it a bit, or kind of read between the lines. I assume it because these are two very successful women. Why we're doing these two women who never connect in their own lifetime, how you're going to connect it, I assume is going to be the feminist perspective or the feminist angle. But I think that one extra bit to kind of pull it through and say, great, this is a good vehicle for looking at contemporary feminist issues by looking at two historical figures. And that I would have needed. And just to second another thought, the idea that maybe just giving us 30 seconds of who you were, clearly from your pitch, your experience, and you've got a good grasp of the subject. And so I thought that was really great. And perhaps in the future, if you can avoid reading anything, it really, what you might miss out in reading, in speaking extemporaneously, you may gain more in holding our eye contact and give me that idea that you've internalized your subject and you've got a grasp of it. But I thought the pitch was really good, and I thought you've got a good subject. I would suggest you go one more step and find that narrative arc that kind of pulls all the threads together.
One question for the panel. What do you think of the idea of pitching against a pre-cut set of backdrop stills? How did that work for you?
It worked. I thought the stills were great, and it worked for me, and I thought you wove your comments into them. I as a general course, I've seen it not work, but I thought in your case it did work, and it sort of brought you instantly into their whole being.
I worried that you might feel that, am I listening or am I looking, and are they matching? And I wondered if anybody felt that, whether it might have worked perfectly well this time, if it isn't a little dangerous as a mode to go into. I don't know. Anybody feel that?
Yeah, well, I prefer to hear the pitch and then see a clip, and I would have liked to have seen less stills and to see if you, because they're successful people, I imagine there would be a lot of motion picture on them, and I would have loved to have heard a snippet of her and her. And then, and 30 seconds is all I need to get a taste of it, because the two brand names are really well known. And then it's really a question of then delivering the pitch. That's a personal preference.
You feeling on that? My other question was, when you're doing a dual biography, it seems to me that there's an issue in differentiating as well as building between the dual biography. It's true whether they're, Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt married or rivals here. Was that good for you? Did that give you, why am I doing one against the other? Does it help to do it that way?
Well, for me it does. I think it adds dramatic dimension. Certainly the names are icons, so yeah, I think it's a great way to do it.
And I think for me, a bio on either of the women would not have been as compelling. To me, the story is about their relationship, and as Rudy said, these two women never met. Well, there's the story. Yeah. I mean, how can these two giants in one field who followed such similar paths have never met? And even though they never met, their lives were still very much intertwined, and the two of them still influenced each other very much from what you've told us so far, that they were reacting to each other.
Louisa, do you need the microphone?
No, she can't on this.
I represent the project.
One last question about the pitch here. Should there have been an ask in this pitch?
Can I
Yes.
Okay. And could we poll? Yes. Do you think there should have been an ask?
I was curious about the budget and the fact that nothing came up, and how much you had already. That was a missing question.
And actually, this isn't usually the way that we work, just because we get over 3,000 proposals a year. And so the way that we work at PBS, it's very, very unusual to have somebody come in and just do a cold pitch. Generally, we would have everything in advance. As much information as is available, we will have it, we will have read it, we will have discussed it, and then if we have additional questions, we go to the filmmaker. So you're really making your pitch to us through your materials. That said, in the materials, yes, we expect to have an ask. Given that this isn't the traditional way that we work, what you did was just fine, because I'm looking at the story first. I'm looking at the story, and then even if there's any sparkle of interest, then I'm going to get to all of those questions. What are your credentials? I mean, you told me already that you've been working on this project for 2 years, so that answers a big question for me, which is, what is your level of commitment? There are some people who are pitching 4 or 5 projects at the same time. So you answered a lot of my questions already in the pitch, and then I would, after I figure out that I'm interested in the initial idea, then I would go and ask all these questions about the budget, who are your other international co-production partners, et cetera, clearance for the clips, all of that business.
We want to move on, but we'll take one more. Rudy, you want to say something?
Just to pick up on that point, it's interesting. I prefer getting the oral pitch, when I meet someone, being pitched the story, and for me the ask is usually, are you interested enough to read the proposal and have a meeting? For me, the pitches, I prefer it that way. For me, the pitches are an ask. They're a way to try to get a serious meeting with some quiet time where you can flesh things out. So I've come to work. I flipped my orientation, and I think that I love the oral storytelling aspect of it. And if you intrigue me enough, where I say, what else happens? Let's have a meeting and take an hour to discuss those things in a conversational mode. So I like that ask that says to try to get to that meeting.
Okay. I think rather than take questions from the audience, we should keep going, because I really think you're going to learn a lot by seeing the very different kinds of programs that are being pitched and the people who are pitching them. So can we move on? Are we ready to move on? Let's take for our second one with Alec Ogden, who is pitching a film called, I'm going to say this wrong, Secrecy's Captives 2. Did I do that wrong? Probably.
Secrecy's Captives 2. Secrecy was a goddess of dance, so so that will explain it. It's too loud, no? Okay. So when I have 1 minute left, if you can just...
No, I don't think I can. But
right.
I'll try.
So my name is Alec Ogden, and I'm a filmmaker, originally from Moscow, Russia, and has been in Boston since 1996. I'm co-producing a film named Terpsichore's Captives 2. And this film reveals the mysteries behind the collaboration of 2 very established artists, Bill T. Jones, who is an African-American choreographer, who is probably one of the most famous choreographers in the world right now in modern dance, and Natasha Balachnichova, who is a prima ballerina of the Kremlin Ballet from Moscow. Why Natasha? She's less known to you. The point is in 1993 there was the first film made about her, Terpsichore's Captives. That film looked at her years in the ballet school in Russia, and it was really about the price paid for the perfection of the ballet and for kind of question the tyrannic approach that Russians have to bringing up the stars. So since then she became a very successful prima ballerina and kind of ready for new discoveries right now. She's at crossroads because she outgrown her company artistically. She's really bored with the classical repertoire that keeps being restaged by her choreographer. So she's really ready to move on. So I introduced her to Bill T. Jones through the film that Bill did in memory of his partner, Arnie Zane, Untitled. And in that film, Bill uses verbal language and movement to express his feelings and grief about his partner. So she was incredibly stunned by that and was really wondering if she could collaborate with Bill. So I approached Bill, and it was not very easy to do because he's such a big star, but I have been involved in dance film for years, since probably 1997. That's what I do, and that's what I love, and in all kinds of ways, from producing a documentary about contemporary African dance to making short experimental films. So I did show Bill's films before, and that's how I could get in touch with him, and I basically showed him Terpsichore's Captives, and he was incredibly stunned by the virtuosity of this young, 29-year-old, fragile ballerina and her power that she had. So they met in 2004, and the film I'm making with a Russian director, Yefim Reznikov, who did the first film. So I'm going to show you a little clip that's about 2 minutes that would kind of give you a taste of personalities of those two and their approach to collaboration. So if you could play this, please.
What do we have to say to each other? Maybe nothing. Maybe this explosion, you don't want to explode. Tell me I am standing today, my balance is not good. Say that to the public. My balance is not good. I turned. I did not like that turn. Confess.
Maybe the collaboration between two people, choreographer and dancer, is like meditation. Is it possible?
Like meditation?
Yes.
How do you mean like meditation? Like you try to clear the mind?
Not clear the mind, but just feel the most important thing maybe. And be calm and peaceful maybe, and powerful at the same time, and maybe that the way to burn fire.
To burn fire?
Yes.
By quiet? Well, it should be very interesting in that. I would love for you to express that to me in this movement way, because I think when movements go through the body, sometimes there are feelings that are not quiet feelings. Sometimes there are mad feelings.
Great, I think we can stop that. So what we decided to do with the artists is to set up 3 residences in Russia, 2 weeks long each. During those residences, they would work together on a stage piece under the title Dancer's Diary. And it'll be a duet, and Bill really wants Natasha to speak in this piece, and she's incredibly terrified by that and yet very challenged. Bill says that if she starts moving differently, she's going to think differently, and that will put her career with the Kremlin Ballet in danger. She's financially dependent on the company. She's also dependent for the company because it gives her a place to live. So for Bill, what is it here for Bill? Bill has never worked with a classical ballerina outside of his company. He had dancers who work with him who are classically trained, but not really outside. He's really fascinated with the Russian system of bringing up dancers and myth of Russian soul, or mystique, if I can say. So he has also, his partner Bjorn has Russian roots, so that's something else that's been always attracting him to go there. In the process, we're hoping to make a short dance film, about 10 minutes. It's going to be an art film that will be packaged together with a documentary, and that would hopefully be like a married couple follow whatever life it will have afterwards. We're hoping to get international broadcasts. I'm not sure about the U.S. broadcast. Natasha speaks English, but it might be a subtitles issue. That's usually what usually cuts off those kind of possibilities. So the project is going to be about $360,000. We have $55,000 raised, $40,000 from Russia, and $15,000 here. In terms of producers, in terms of distributors, Terpsichore's Captives has been distributed by Audience Ideal in France, very successful in here for Cinema Guild. Okay.
Well, it was sort of unexpected, actually. I'm somewhat arts program resistant now because it's so hard to find slots for arts programs internationally. I mean, Rudy has some of the few slots that remain outside of the U.S., and in this country, as you know, we don't have much at all. I think the two of them are interesting subjects. I mean, Bill T. Jones especially, and I love his confrontational style with her. I don't feel that the demo serves you that well because the material doesn't really capture them per se. There wasn't a straight-on shot of him talking. I mean, I wanted to see what he looked like when he was saying some of these things to her, and it frustrated me a bit. In the arts area, I've always turned to what we used to call process films as in many ways more interesting than just straight performance. You know, even if it was a masterclass idea, I would always personally as a watcher, but also professionally as a distributor, I would go towards the process film versus the straight performance right away. And that's what I feel that you're trying to do. But I have a sense that you're taking on maybe something it's too big a sweep in the way that you're describing it. And I would almost say that a repackaging of the title, a more direct approach into the subject matter to try to present this as something between the two of them, rather than necessarily bringing in all of that background right at the beginning. It's a fascinating juxtaposition, and I think that you could the project would benefit if you made it a little bit more starkly about those elements, and then they would come up more strongly, especially with a demo that showed them in a more effective way.
I also had the feeling that there was a missed opportunity in terms of how you presented it, because it took a while until you got to that issue of her career and her lifestyle is really in danger because of this collaboration. And I had some concerns, having been around Bill also, that how were you going to prevent him from just steamrolling all over this dancer, and what were you really going to have after he steamrolled her? And I wasn't sure, you know, what you were putting in place to sort of be aware of that, or to set up a structure similar to what Louise said, so that you were very tight about what this film was going to do.
My take is a little different from others on this panel because I represent myself as a private investor in something like this. And so my mind, I'm interested in Russia right now. I think that from what I know, the film business in Russia is growing. It's an interesting place. So immediately I perk up and I say, you know, people are interested in the Russian system more and more. And where did your money come from in Russia? I know there's a lot of new money in Russia. And so I'm very interested in specifics like that, and I find that intriguing. So I think that would be a big help to you in your project.
Well, I actually liked your enthusiasm. I like the fact that you're committed to the subject. You made it quite clear that you have a passion for dance. And so that was important for me to know that you've got an internal perspective on that. So I thought that was really good. And the fact that you're Russian and that you're and from Moscow, so that you're dealing with a subject matter in a place that you're familiar with. I think those are very strong elements. And you were clear about how much it was going to cost and what you were looking for. So I thought those elements were really good. To echo what Louise said, I think you, in a pitch, you'd have to focus our attention onto what it is that you're going to do and less on what's happened and how you got to today. So I think the title is troublesome in terms of presenting it as a sequel to a film we may not have seen. And perhaps it wasn't really necessary for that. So, and I would have left out a lot of that backstory and started with what clearly were two really interesting characters. She seems like a beautiful young woman. He's a beautiful older man who's quite overpowering. Imagine she'll get her comeuppance when she gets to speak to the camera in Russian and see if he can catch up on that. So I think that was what you had as a real strength, and I would suggest, especially because you're proposing to do it in a cinema verite style, that like cinema verite, your story starts when you start filming, and perhaps your pitch should have started at that moment and strip away everything else. Also, I would just pitch the documentary. Don't mention the short film right now. You sneak that one in on everybody afterwards once they've got their money committed to it. But stay focused on that one thing. But I think you've got the makings of something promising.
Allison, did you want to step in? I would say from the PBS perspective, first of all, I agree with what everyone else has said here. The pitch was, I'm not sure where the filmmaker. Oh, there you are. Hi. The pitch was tough for me because I'm trying to look at not just as a person who might watch the film, but also as somebody who is trying to schedule for a variety service. And so I understand where people who are interested in the area of dance would be drawn to the film automatically. But I'm also looking for, what about the general audience? And we always want to invite them in to also sample some of these subjects that they may not necessarily be automatically drawn to. And I think that the pitch felt too dense for me. And perhaps in saying that, I'm reflecting my own density or denseness. Or my allergy state right now. But I struggled. And I think for our audience, these are not folks who have a lot of extra time and they're not attending film festivals, and they don't necessarily have the space in their lives to just sit and accept what is coming to them on screen. They are looking to be either informed or entertained for these, this 2-hour period in the evening. And this is not something I think that they would have the patience to take in.
Okay, so a range of responses to this here we're looking at, and some of it is overlapping. We're seeing how powerful the imagery, how you present the imagery and what you do with it is in a pitch. You see how powerful the overall shape of what you're giving is. Do we see the story? Do we see the film? And we see that even the little things matter. This panel this pitch, we were talking about the title. I mean, you would think a title is too little. Nothing is too little. It's really, really tight.
On a positive note, this format is beautiful. You gave us a wonderful one-pager, because this is basically what I go back and do for the projects. Because we tend to get volumes of paper, and to have everything right here where I can easily see the pieces of information is a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Okay. More? Anything more here? Shall we move quickly on?
Well, just on that page, the fact that a one-pager actually comes in as one page is really important. And also the thing is that television executives have incredibly small attention spans. So that's important. But you really have to sneak it onto one page in 12-point type, because also people like me get older and eyesight gets harder. And briefer is always better. A one page with a dynamite opening paragraph that says what you're going to do and how you're going to do it is just a fabulous way to get somebody to read into it. So a one-pager is really important, especially if it's concise.
And the equivalent for the pitch, the one-pager is what we're saying here. A dynamite starting paragraph, knock me out and make me want more, is what you want to do. You can't tell an hour or a 2-hour film in one page or in 7 minutes. And 7 minutes, we should say, is pretty generous for a pitch. Okay, we gave you an extra 2 minutes against our better judgment here, just to be a little more friendly. All right? We're going to move on to I think we're doing very well here. We have a chance, I think, to get to all 4 of them. And we will next switch to Peter Gallison, who is pitching a documentary called Secrecy.
I'm Peter Gallison. I'm a physicist and historian of science at Harvard. I'm making a film, Secrecy, with Rob Moss, who's an independent filmmaker who made a film recently called The Same River Twice. We're interested in the problem of secrecy because it affects the fundamental nature of what our democracy is going to look like. There are about 2.5 million people in the United States who have clearance at this point. Of those people, they're producing documents that each year about 5 times the number of pages that go into the New York Public Library in all languages on all subjects. This is an extraordinary and huge bureaucracy. We want to know how this process works, where it's located, physically how it works, and then to open up the question as to how it affects people's lives. What does it mean to live in a world where there's this much secrecy, increasing at the rate since September 11th of about 25% a year? The issues at stake are, what do we mean by deliberative democracy, and what will be possible for us as we confront a world in which so much of it is hidden from view? What will it mean for security, and is openness the opposite of security, or in fact, does openness necessary for security? These are the kinds of issues. I'd like to start with the opening of the film, and then I'll show you one clip after that.
Information is power. Information has potency. Some information, in fact, is so potent that it could be dangerous. God created the universe with speech. Some speech is so powerful, its creative power or its destructive power is almost boundless. Secrecy is an attempt to regulate that power, to control its flow from its authorized possessors in the government and away from unauthorized personnel, such as myself. There's almost a mythological drama going on. Will you be permitted access to this source of power? In many cases, the answer is no. You will not be permitted.
This is Stephen Aftergood. He's head of the Openness Project of the Federation of American Scientists. The problem, of course, in making a film about secrecy is, what do you show? And what we're doing, we're about a third of the way through the project, is to open up with the stakes, what counts, what is it in our present world, why do we care about it, and competing views. I'll show you another shot of somebody, unlike Aftergood, who Aftergood believes that there's far too much secrecy and it's getting worse, to somebody else who thinks that there's far too much openness and it's getting worse. So to open up the stakes, the majority of the film is then pursuing places where secrecy and individuals come into conflict and what it means for them, partly through the establishment of case law, that is to say the cases that led to our current system, partly through looking at the conflicts around issues where secrecy has been much debated, ranging from debates in the 1940s around the Manhattan Project and attempts to blow up a harbor in Alaska using thermonuclear bombs that Teller wanted to do, to Abu Ghraib on the present side of things. And then in the final act, we'll open up to the broader questions about what this means if the current trends continue the way they are for who we are as members of a deliberative democracy under these conditions. Can I show the second clip? This is one of the heads of someone very high in the national security in the NSA, and he was there from its foundation in the late 40s.
The fact of the matter is that there is a need for secrecy in order to protect the national security of the United States.
It was a terrible day in a city which has experienced so much tragedy. The American embassy in Beirut shattered by a huge bomb.
In Lebanon, in 1983, terrorists attacked the American embassy
Terrorists drove a stolen police car to the front of the building
and caused a lot of damage and some deaths.
killing, injuring, and trapping those inside.
We at NSA were listening to the communications of the people that did it, and we knew who they were and what country was supporting them. It was Iran supporting them through the Hezbollah.
Tehran to the Iranian embassy.
This fact was leaked
cables were intercepted by American intelligence prior to...
It got into the press somehow, I don't know how, that almost immediately that communication channel that we were using so productively to derive intelligence on the whereabouts of these terrorists, that channel dried up. We lost a critical source of intelligence. Eight months later, the same terrorists bombed the Marine barracks in Beirut, and we lost over 240 United States Marines. This is the kind of damage that can come from a leak of sensitive information.
This next is Garfinkel. He ran an Information Security Oversight Office, which covered all secrecy for all agencies in the American government.
We have so much information being created. It's hard to imagine that humanly it can be controlled.
Peter, you're out of time. You're out of time.
As secrecy disappears over time.
You talked for, you said 7 minutes total. Stop. You need to stop. I'm sorry, one of the lessons of pitching is everything counts. Talking and tape counts.
Sure,
if you have 4.5 minutes of... Yeah, thank you. Sorry. But if this is a pitch battle...
I'll start out. I would say of the 3 clips, I would say the second and the third clip, what we saw of it, were much more engaging. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones where I stopped fiddling around with my Kleenex and trying to blow my nose while no one was looking, and I really looked at the screen. And I think it's because in those clips you establish for us the dilemma. And the first clip and even the introduction, to a certain extent, was too academic for me, for the audience. These are very important conversations, and they are going on, and they need to go on. But we also, we need to again invite the audience in to have this conversation and make it relevant to their lives. So 2 things. One, about the clips. Invite us in with those clips. And then the second point I would make is, instead of starting out with more of the academic argument, start out with these human interest stories that you sort of touched on. Tell me, first of all, why this is important to what is happening in my life right now, and then I'll go through the process of thinking through it with you.
I would second that and say that I also, at a certain point, had a concern during the first clip, because I thought, what footage can they really show? Is this, and I don't think that should be a concern in a pitch. I think that we should be looking for the footage instead of thinking, do they just have talking heads, and what is there that we can really look at that's going to engage us visually? I actually sat here and thought, I wonder what the pitch was like for the corporation, because that's also an incredibly dense film, and so I think you're going to really have to work hard to unpack that so that we see it as a film rather than just a sort of fabulous New Yorker article.
I think this is very exciting, and not as presented, but, I do have other information, and so, whether I'm supposed to or not, I don't know. And I saw this as a thriller. I mean, I think you should package this like a thriller and tell more about, you are much too modest. Tell who you are, because that really impresses me. And I agree that Mr. Aftergood was kind of boring, and so I wouldn't use him. And then the second clip, I would cut down on it a little bit. But you could really package this almost theatrically. It's exciting stuff. So that's what. Yeah, that's.
I was going to say that it seems to me you're still struggling with a notion of how literal or figurative to make this, because there are moments when your clip looks like I'm in the middle of a front line, but then I'm also listening to the music and I'm hearing you talk about it and I'm reading some of the other material and I'm seeing something that's much more of a meditation on a much bigger idea. Now, I think you need to come to terms with it being in one place or the other. You're not going to please everyone in one place or the other. I mean, it's got to decide on its identity in a sense. I think that the world is going to be more interested in the idea of the meditation because we've seen a lot of these individual case histories and analyses of what happened when security was breached or, you know, I don't know that we need. I think that what you have to offer to the subject is in this bigger realm, and I think that you should orient that way. And in that sense, it's almost when you have a piece in here about a man giving away his organs before the end of his life, and I mean, I first read this and I thought, oh, this is it came from another proposal. I mean, it's a total non sequitur in this. And then when I kind of latched on to your more philosophical approach, I felt, well, that's where I'm interested. That's what grabs me. That's where I'd like to see this go and try to get away from the literalness of the news reportage and, frankly, the very Amerocentric aspect of what you've shown us so far.
Well, I commissioned the corporation 5 years ago, and so I can tell you what the pitch was like. This is, I think, what Louise, if I can pick up in your idea, I'm not sure that meditation is the way to go, but the idea that this is essentially a thesis film. I mean, that's what it's struggling, whether it's going to be an investigation to the state of secret society in, official secret society here in the United States, or whether it's going to be a thesis about the nature of secrecy in a democratic society. And that's where I think you're a bit ambivalent, or it seems to me, not sure which way you want to go. The thesis, if it's a thesis film, then it's important that what is your thesis? That's what I want to know. What about it? And two, how are you going to make the invisible visible? When the corporation was pitched to me for about a year about the fact that corporations were important entities that had come about to rival the church and state, and we talked about it, and the producers talked to me a lot about how important it was, and I kept saying, I know it's important. How are you going to do it? And finally, they brought together a law professor who'd been teaching, Joel Bakken, who'd been teaching. Doing a course in his law classes about the nature of the corporation and had developed the thesis that in American law, the corporations had the same status as a person. And so he said, if it's a person, what kind of a person is it? And he decided in the film we'll subject it to a psychological test. And the outcome being that if it's a person, the corporation displays all the attributes of a psychopath. And what it does is then it lays about, as having anthropomorphized that, it then goes about and says, this is my thesis and this is how I'll visualize it. And I think you're onto it's clearly an important subject, secrecy in a democracy. But you've got to articulate that thesis up front and then give us an idea of how are you going to struggle with the visualization of what is essentially invisible. And I agree with the modesty. I mean, I read your background, and it's incredibly impressive, and I would have pumped that up a little up front because clearly you've got some impressive bona fides there, and I think that's important in terms of approaching a thesis film. I like the clip. I like the music. I like the moody part of it best.
Let's point to an emotion versus information range that's an issue for you, that you have this incredibly intellectual subject area that you're trying to put emotion onto the screen with, and that's really, really tough. I think that what you're hearing here is clarity, choices that have to be made. I want to bring one more question in on this for the panel, which is, I don't know if I want to go to there or not. The order of pitching. At this point, we've had 3 pitches. We are going to have a 4th. We're going to fit it in. Yes, yes. Does it make a difference where you fall in the pitching day? If it's you're the 1st, the 4th, or the 97th? And what does the person pitching, the pitcher, do about being number 97 or 18?
Right after lunch.
Bring chocolate.
Right. Bring food.
Successful strategies. We're looking for.
Well, I do a lot of pitching panels around the world, and I remember once, and you can tell the time of day. We're all human beings, you know. If you're the very first pitch on the very first day, everybody's nervous. The people you're pitching to, the people that are pitching, and the audience. And so I think you get bonus points for being the first. You know, the same way you do in school. But I was doing a pitch panel. I had to do a 3-hour presentation to an Italian audience of 200 people. And at lunchtime, I watched the Italians, my fellow countrymen, drink wine. And I thought, this is going to be crazy. So, of course, what I asked them when I was doing the presentation, I realized I'm going to face this incredibly sleepy crowd because they're going to sit there in these really plush, comfortable seats. And the wine is going to have difficulty moving from their stomachs to their brain, where the blood is. And I'm in that case, I decided to do a bit of agitprop, and I said, you know what? I've got 2.5 hours with you. There's no way I'm talking to a quiet audience. Besides, this is a networking opportunity, and I bet you that the person that you've been sitting next to for the last 6 hours, you don't even know what their names are. So why don't you turn around and introduce yourself to each other? And it forced everybody up off their seats, and they started moving around. And as soon as I had them, we went right into the pitch. Because that first few minutes, you've got to read your audience as to whether you've got them. Are they sleepy? Are they nervous? And that's why it's important not to read, because you have to read your audience and then play to the people that you've got right then and there. And at that moment, modulate either your voice, change your pitch, decide that it's either going to be academic because these people are really into it, or you know something, they just need to be interested and they need to make eye contact because they've been doing other stuff. So, yes, it's important.
Notice that standing up helps. Rudy has just demonstrated for us that standing up helps. Other reactions to that, or shall we go on? Right? Onward. Our last person up. Thank you, Peter. Our last person up is Hedy Siebel, who is talking about her film, The Expeditionist.
I have witnesses in the room that I always bring chocolate to my pitches. This is the first one I haven't brought chocolate to. So I'm Hedy Siebel, and this is my film. I'm currently a filmmaker in residence at WGBH, but my background is in the fine arts. This is not the story of a failed adventure. This is the story of my imaginative connection to it, to that experience, and to an artist of 100 years ago, Anthony Fiala, commander and expedition leader of the Ziegler Polar Expedition. In 1903, my grandfather interrupted his medical studies to go to the North Pole with the Ziegler Polar Expedition. 39 men, 30 ponies, and 218 dogs sailed to the Franz Josef Land Islands in the Russian Arctic. Their ship was crushed and sank, marooning them on the islands for 2 years. They made 3 attempts to the pole, failed to cross the pack ice even more than a mile, and quit. When I first started this project, I thought it was going to be a story about my grandfather. And I studied him, and I read his journals, but I really found that I had fallen in love with the commander, Anthony Fiala. And what really connected me to him was that he was an artist, and he was going into the Arctic as an artist and struggling to be the leader. Then I thought, well, I wanted to make this documentary as an expedition documentary. So I would go to the Franz Josef Land Islands myself, and I'd trace the camps, and I'd paint the landscape, and I'd tell their story. So I got a grant from National Geographic, but I couldn't get the permits from the Russians. So I had to turn back the grant, and and give up on the idea. I, too, like Vaughn and Fiala, was frustrated in my efforts. What is really different about this film is its intention. No one ever talks about the relationship between the explorer and the artist, and the relationship between the creative journey and the process of discovery. I have been haunted by these men, by their story, by their conflict, by the born-again, eccentric Commander Anthony Fiala coming up against the dynamic scientist Dr. Vaughn, my grandfather. So I went to archives and I found in another man's archive, I found an unmarked portfolio with original photographs by Anthony Fiala. They were so beautiful that I felt that I had to tell this story, and it had to be a story about looking. I also found missing film footage in London. It's never been seen. Well, it was seen at the turn of the century in German newsreel. But Fiala went to the Arctic with a bioscope camera, and he shot 28,000 feet of 35 millimeter motion picture film by loading the camera and wrapping it in hot blankets and shooting it until the film became brittle and broke. In my story, I am in my studio, and I am making Franz Josef Land as life-size prints. I see the midnight sun. I see the rocks that mark the landscape of the men. And by making these prints, I enter Franz Josef Land, and I connect with their story and the work of Anthony Fiala. So I have a 4-minute clip. This is going to be a half-hour documentary that is going to be shot on Super 16 film.
I never knew my grandfather. He died before I was born. But the one thing I do know about him is his greatest disappointment, that he never reached the North Pole. My grandfather, Vaughn, held his commander responsible for the expedition's failure. And in turn, his commander, Anthony Fiala, lamented his selection of men.
Fiala did not start on the trip again today. He tells me it's to get accurate information as to the condition of the ice. But he knows, and I know, and any damn fool could figure out that it's changing all the time.
The Arctic is a field that will try to the utmost men's souls. The first consideration in the choice of men should be their moral quality. Many a jolly good fellow will become impatient, selfish, and mean when obliged to sacrifice his comfort and work hard in what seems a losing fight.
He's going to lose the whole party. He is that kind of a cowardly maniac.
They were ordinary American heroes, their young hearts fired by a dream to seek a compass point above a frozen sea. So in 1903, when my maternal grandfather was invited to join the Ziegler Polar Expedition, he jumped at the opportunity to make history and satisfy his scientific curiosity. The plan was risky: sail to the Franz Josef Land Islands, still partially uncharted, and from there drive dog and pony teams round trip over ice to the North Pole. Until this expedition, my grandfather had only known success in his life, and I expect the burden of failure was a heavy one to bear. It was 1996, and a hot day in July when, on a whim, I read my grandfather's copy of the book about the Ziegler expedition. I had come to a roadblock in my own life. I had lost my job, and with it, the only professional identity I
And
had ever known.
that's 7 minutes
Being a
there.
professor in an art college. They'd been 19
That's 7 minutes,
years.
guys.
What with?
I feel completely dreadful. Everybody being pitched feels completely dreadful when they say, your time is up. And it's a real skill in pitching to figure out how to stay within your time parameters. It's very hard to stop a film. I'm sorry. Anybody care to jump in? We can let Rudy go first. You've always gone graciously last, if you like.
Well, I actually like this from the paper because from the one sheet, which was very good, by the way. And I'm always intrigued about how to integrate an artist and personal film with a historical subject or any, what that integration is. And I'm just wondering about your pitch and having seen the clip, if you've sort of buried your lead, if you are trying to fit your uncle's story and the expedition into your story as opposed to vice versa. What really, piqued my interest, and I'm sure other people too, is this: you've got miles of never before seen footage of an expedition when cinematography is very, very young. It's absolutely in its first decade, I think. And I would just love to have seen more of that footage. And then as a proposition, how you would fit your story into it following that footage. I would have inverted it because that's what interested me on your page. I did like I liked your clip. I like films on artists and that, but I wasn't. It felt like it was one film, and your uncle's story, I wasn't sure how those fit together. And I would have wanted to see more of that expeditionary footage, and then perhaps in your pitch talk about how you would have approached the integration of your own journey there.
I would agree. But I thought in some ways what you did on the screen was very, I found that very intriguing, because it seemed to me that I felt at some points in your pitch that you were trying to grab at all the different topics and sort of throw them all out and meditate on them while you were throwing them out, and that the pitch wasn't really clear about what you were going to do with this film. But then when I saw it, I was much more drawn in. I actually, the only thing I would caution about that footage is the over Shackleton. I mean, I think there's just, when I looked at that footage, I thought, oh, it's that boat again. Because we've sort of seen that. I mean, and we've seen it fabulously. So I think that is something you have to be cautious of, because it's compelling footage, but it's, if you want people to see it, will they, and probably you could speak to that, will they watch it if they feel that they've seen it before? I liked the artist piece, and I really wondered what you were going to do physically with that. And I would have thought about maybe even going in that direction more. You're going to have to really decide a path for that, especially if you're only making half an hour, about what story you really want to tell.
No, I think you're right. It comes back to the same issue that... Oh,
no, go ahead.
Sure. The same issue with the previous film, with having to make, a decision. And sometimes people allow the company that's most interested to make the decision for them, which path you're going to take. And sometimes, if it's something that's very personal to you, you're just going to have to decide, no, this is what I want this film to be, and that's what it's going to be. And, people can take it or leave it. And I mean that in a generous way. I think the pitch, I understand what you were trying to do with your pitch, that you were trying to get us in your mindset and almost slow us down to sort of more of a meditative feeling. But I think that you're better served by showing the film, and the film in a way pitches the program, if in fact what you're trying to pitch is this story, this adventure. And what I would be looking for is something that is more character-driven, a story. And then everything else is what adds the texture to the film. So your personal connection, that shouldn't be what you lead with. in my eyes, that should be sort of the gravy. It's like, wow, there's this cool story, and guess what? The filmmaker is connected to one of the people that was on the expedition. And then also the fact that you're an artist and you're trying to add into the texture of the film this link between art and discovery. So those should be secondary, and it should be the characters and the adventure that is primary.
When I hear a pitch, I look for who the audience is and who are the supporters that are going to propel this film to be made, and that it's actually going to be shown. And I don't see who they are here. So I'm unclear as to what your distribution channel would be. And I think you need a hook. And I think there are people, explorer types at the Explorers Club or something like that, who you need to gather around you to help propel this whole project forward, because it's an artful project and kind of amorphous, the idea. So it really has to be extraordinary, I think, and that's possible. So that's my thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to say that what a pleasure to see a demo with a camera that moves. I mean, so many pieces that are prepared for presentation are so static, and internationally, I mean, this is death. You cannot just shoot interviews and then package that. My heart just warmed from that moment on, and the way that the camera was used to reveal you and then hide you, and it immediately made me come into your pace. Now, I agree with some of the comments about the ambiguity of which through line to work with on in your verbal pitch, because I think you were perhaps in some ways trying to cover too many bases. But I feel that once you decide where you want to place the emphasis, what your hook is, based on your own view of the material, then if you stick with that, you pull in the other things after it. You obviously there's kind of a treasure trove here. It's a matter of having to make some choices about which line of it you're going to make the spine. But like everyone, I would have loved to have seen some of that other footage. But yeah, no.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you. We want to open it to questions. I do want to point out a couple of just one or two things, which is very interestingly, a lot of what we saw today had not just one story, but two stories or two characters, and a lot of what we discussed here was the filmmaker making it clear what was foreground and what was background, what was through line, what was driving it. And you heard that there were different ways of making that choice more clear and more successful for us. I saw a hand up back there. We're supposed to repeat questions.
I was wondering how important it is to define audience in the pitch, especially if you're afraid of your filming a niche film. To make a film female, why would the male audience be interested? Or the Arctic film, if you're not an explorer, what about the other audience? Does it help to try to define audience when making the pitch?
Okay, does it help to define the audience for the film when you're doing the pitch?
I think it really depends on who you're pitching to. If you're in front of a group of broadcasters, your pitch is going to have to be changed to appear to be broadcast friendly. If you're, again, if it's a group of investors, you may have to do background research on the interests of those investors, the kinds of things that they've worked on before, and how to maybe angle it so that you grab something of personal interest to them. I think you just have to be fluid about it.
Do you mean who the audience is for your pitch or for your
That's the question.
film? Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question. I think you
should. Because if it's not immediately obvious, I think to the powder and the glory is kind of obvious to me who the audience is. But if it's not obvious, such as maybe in the The Expeditionist, I would like to see that framed for me, because maybe I'm not thinking in that area, and if you can enlighten me with that, then that would be a good thing.
There's a woman, I don't know, hi, in purple, and behind you is someone else. So you first, one and then the other.
First question. In the first pitch we had, a number of you referred to the ask, and I just want to be clear what you're talking about.
Okay, what's an ask?
How much money you want from us.
Or what? Or how much money or what you want. Maybe you want distribution, or you want broadcast slot, or you want, what do you want? That you're pitching to me. You know, is it only my money that attracts you?
I think in some cases you also need to tell if you have money already. Some people want to be the first money in, and some people don't want to be the first money in.
Okay, and in back, yep.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you're doing the visual part of the pitch, how important are you looking for, just sort of like in the first pitch, or just sort of here's visual elements that go with the pitch, as opposed to a filmic style, which some of the other pitches maybe have more like, this is the style I bring to the film. Does it matter? Are you looking for one or the other?
Okay, so what are you looking for in the visual part of the tape part of the pitch?
It's a question of what you've got to work with. You have to make the best of what you've got. Not everybody is in a position to go out and start filming prior to making a presentation like this. So your resources might be somewhat limited. I think you do the best with what you can, and you compensate for what you don't have in your energy level and your ability to tell the story, because in the end, it's the storytelling that will push it across the line. I think we've all seen projects pitched that have had no visual material at all, and some of them succeed better than those that do. So in the end, it's your ability to sell the idea. Can I just go back to the point about the audience for 1 second? Sure. In my experience, I have found that it can be a terrible mistake to try to tell someone, and I think with broadcasters this is very much the case, this will be perfect for your audience, because there's a presumptuousness in that. And I wouldn't push that too far. I would only, instead of identifying them and their audience, I think it's quite fair to speculate who would have an interest in it, but not to necessarily say, I know your job and I know why you should make the decision, because that sets up a kind of resistance.
You know, in terms of demo reels, I've found that, or clips, I've found that it can do two things. It can really excite people to want to know more about your project, or it can kill it dead forever, and almost nothing in between. And, it really, what you show is really dependent on what the nature of your work is. So if it's a character-driven piece, a scene with a key character that's supposed to carry the entire picture is going to be very important. If it's a domestic drama with a couple of key characters, your ability, a scene that shows that you can gain access and that you know where to point the camera when something hot is happening, and how it reveals how you follow the action. So something that demonstrates both your ability and to do what you say you're going to do, but also that it's suitable for the nature of the work at hand, depending on the genre of the documentary, depending on the style and your approach. So, and there, in an international audience where your reputation does not precede you with finished work, a clip is becoming more and more essential. You have to invest in that because people want to see. It's become absolutely essential, but it's also incredibly important because it can kill something dead.
I would also add another dimension that's a pitch, but a pitch of a different sort, and that is, I'm sure 99% of people here are not self-funding. So there's the issue of what, and we actually do workshops around this when it's time for certain kinds of funding, and that is what funders are going to look at. People come to, whether it's the federal funders, local funders, And people come to me all the time and say, well, what should I show? I have so much. And I tell them, show your most compelling 4 minutes. Show the 4 minutes, cue something to 4 minutes that's going to have people in there, because that's all you have. And for the most part, especially when you're dealing with people looking at lots and lots and lots of work and reading lots and lots of proposals, they need to be jolted by what they're seeing, especially if you can't always be there, and so your work has to pitch itself. You can't get there and stand up and have everybody introduce themselves.
We have time for one or maybe two questions. There was a hand over here and then here. Am I missing anyone way in the back? Because I'm not seeing you. Go on.
Yes, I'd like to put the ask. Could we ground this a little bit? I'd love to hear, what are you guys asking for? Would that fit into this?
What do we say that again?
What do you mean? I'm curious. We saw 4 projects, and it's compelling. And here, I'm curious to know what it is the ask.
$650,000.
$650,000, and you've raised money so far.
I see. We're looking at what the ask is, and just very quickly, just because it's hard for them, I'm going to have to say the first film was looking for support in $650,000. Second was 360. Third. Nope, sorry, you're fourth. Third, Secrecy, 350, and for 250, and a lot of it is for rights. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's the answer. Those were the budgets, right? But that's not the ask. So, for instance, if I'm talking to a distributor, I say, "Hey, it costs $650,000. You know what I really need? I really need a partner, or I need a distribution that can get me foreign rights because I'm okay in the USA." If I'm at a broadcaster, I'm saying, "Look, I actually don't need you to be the prime broadcaster. I need you to be a strong second window in this territory." Again, it depends who you're speaking to. You have to ask. A lot of times I find filmmakers let me off the hook. They tell me, "You want to hear a great story?" And sure, tell me. And then they'll tell me. And they'll say, "What do you think? It's interesting." I go, "Yeah, it's really interesting." And then they don't ask, and I think, good, because I don't really like it, and I don't have to say anything. And they've let me off the hook. They don't say, "Will you come in? Will you support me? Will you be the lead broadcaster? Will you be the secondary broadcaster? Can you introduce me to somebody else? Can you suggest something?" You're going there for a specific purpose. The more you know what you're going in there for, the better off you are when you get to the final end and say, "So?" And then that's the ask. And again, it depends on who you're speaking and what do you want from them specifically.
You have to have done your research on who you're asking it to, so you know whether these are people with money or people with distribution abilities or people with broadcast slots. You can ask them for what they have. You can't ask someone who doesn't have a broadcast outlet to give you a slot. So, question here?
Sure. Do you have any advice to first-time filmmakers so that when they send you materials, they're fully considered and not kind of dismissed as being amateur?
Okay, materials. What should we look for first-time filmmakers? What would you want?
I really think it's the product, and I'm going to tell you a 2-second story. Murder Ball, coming out in June. 3 filmmakers. 2 had never done anything. 1 had done a film I'd never heard of. They had a 3-minute clip that got to Mark Ehrman at Think Film. They had zillions of dollars worth of money to raise. Think Film went in, raised all the money, stood behind the film.
That's a high act. I've actually seen that. That's a high action film, though. For something that's slightly more, I don't know, where you really do have to rely on.
Yeah. Why don't you give we have time for a quick answer. We really have to wrap up here. And we can stay and talk, but we really have to.
I think it never hurts to try to have a grandfathered relationship. By that, I mean finding somebody who knows somebody somewhere so that you are writing at the suggestion of, or you're contacting them at the suggestion of, rather than cold calling. Because we all get proposals coming in over the transom, by the bucket loads. And with the best will in the world, you can't possibly look at everything. But if it has someone else's name on it who you do know, you're going to feel an obligation to at least take a look at it.
I would like to have more answers, but I think we can't. We have to wrap up here. Thank you very much. This was a terrific and solid panel, and we award our Profiles in Courage Award to all 4 of the individuals and groups who generously pitched. Thank you.